Hey, what is up? There's nothing worse than getting to your campsite and realizing you forgot something. You're missing some kind of critical piece of equipment or tool or food or whatever it may be. And you're miles and hours away from stores or somewhere where you can get that piece of equipment. So I'm going to walk through how I like to pack for camping. I use one main tote for a lot of our kitchen gear and other miscellaneous tools, and this is just how I stay organized, and this has really helped me get to the point where I'm not forgetting things when we're going on our camping trip. So let's get into this box. So first of all, this is a Plano, I think they call it the Sportsman's Trunk. It's a good sized box. I don't know the actual capacity of it, but it's big, it holds a lot. That being said, it does get kind of heavy. I think I tried to weigh this thing, and it, packed out, fully loaded, can be around 60, 70 pounds. And it's, it's not massively big, but pretty big. So not something you want to be carrying and moving long distances. It does have some wheels on it that you can kind of pull it like a suitcase. That works well on concrete, pavement, but when you get to rocks and gravel and grass, you're basically just dragging a tote along. So a lot of times, depending on the camp setup, if we have to carry this thing a good distance, normally I'll grab my wife and we'll two-man carry it. Sometimes if our vehicle is nice and close to the campground, we'll just leave it on the trailer and don't even move it. Just open it up and carry what we need over to the table or wherever we're cooking. But it's been great. So let's jump into this thing and I'll show you how we've packed it. Had this trunk for probably a good 10 years or so now. I didn't originally buy it for camping, just for holding some gear, but then didn't have a need for it anymore, so it became our camping tote. Initially, all this stuff was just thrown in haphazardly, no organization, and that just kind of became a headache. Every time you're trying to get something out, you're having to dig through all these small odds and ends, and it just made for a big mess. And then when it's time to go, you had to basically pull everything out and repack everything. So last year I took some steps to organize this and set it up the way it is now, and I've been pretty happy over our last couple of trips. So up on top, we have some of our bigger, bulkier items, but this is also some of our main kitchen items. So these are generally the first things that come out. They go onto the table and they pretty much stay out the entire camping trip, so they're not coming in and out very often. Right on top here we have these two collapsible buckets, and so this is what we use for our washing dishes. We usually use one that's a soapy, dirty water, and then one that'll be like a clean rinse. These have been great. Had these for several years. No complaints. Like I said, the collapsible is pretty nice, and you can kind of nest them in on top of each other. So they pack up pretty small. I'll put some Amazon links to all this gear that we really enjoy. It is an Amazon affiliate link, so it will help me out if you like anything you see here to check those out. So those on top, these one of the first things that come out when we get to camp and just kind of live out on the tables. Next thing up is going to be the trusty old Coleman stove. This is one of their 2-burner propane stoves. Use the little green propane bottles. Nothing fancy. I think these things run for about 50 bucks. Definitely not the nicest stove that Coleman makes, but it definitely gets the job done. Again, had this thing for several years. If you clean it, take care of it, it'll last forever. So no complaints there. Definitely gets the job done. Next, we're gonna have our skillets and cookware. Starting with a basic saucepan. So I wanted to buy kind of a camping specific saucepan. I was looking at some of the, GSI style, actual, Stanley camping specific made. They're nice. They're also a little pricey. I happened to be in, I think like a TJ Maxx or Home Goods, and came across this. I don't know the brand, but it's a nice heavy duty skillet or saucepan. The thing I really liked about it is a stainless steel lid. I think before I bought this, we were just bringing one of our home saucepans when we needed it, which had a glass lid. I didn't like bringing the glass lid. A lot of times I wouldn't bring it just because I didn't want it to break. So this having a stainless steel lid, it lives in here. If it's vibrating down the road or getting moved around, I'm not concerned about this thing getting cracked or broken. So this has been good. Again, it's nothing really special to it, but obviously we got this giant tote. We're not backpackers, so size wasn't really too big of a concern. So just doing a standard home saucepan worked for us. Next up is going to be the cast irons. I usually use some kind of like paper towel or something in between our skillets just to keep them when they're rattling going down the road, not scratching things up too bad. So this is a Lodge cast iron set. So I really like this set. You get a deep skillet. I think this is like a 10-inch skillet. And then you get another 10-inch low profile skillet. The cool thing about this is that it has this little ridge at the top, which can act as a lid and basically makes this into a Dutch oven. I don't do a lot of Dutch oven cooking, but this is a nice setup if if we're cooking something and we just need to keep it warm, put the lid on, keeps the bugs out. If there's leftovers, again, you put it, you stack them on top of each other and it keeps bugs out if things are just sitting on there staying warm. So this has been a great set. This fits perfectly with the Coleman stove. You can have these side by side and they're both directly right over the burner. So highly recommend this Lodge set. I think it's probably like 50 bucks again. I'll find some Amazon links and link it in there if you're interested in any of this stuff. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of the organization. So I'm not a carpenter by any means, so don't laugh at my woodworking skills here, but in order to get some of this bigger, heavier stuff up top, I had to build some dividers out of some scrap plywood I had laying around. So I have this little wooden tray here that sits on top, and this is what the skillets sit on. These little guys keep it from moving around too much. Again, it's not pretty, but it gets the job done. And the good thing about this is it allows for all the smaller miscellaneous stuff that you don't necessarily need all the time to kind of rest up underneath. So next big thing that sits on top, and this sits underneath the stove, are just some basic cutting boards. These are kind of a flimsy, cutting board, but they're nice because there's 3 different ones. So if you're chopping some chicken and some veggies, you're not cross-contaminating things. So it makes it a little bit easier to work with. If you're working on like an old dingy picnic table at a campground, you just lay these down and you got a nice, clean, flat surface to work on. So these have been great. And so now we're getting into the compartments. So again, I built these dividers here and they just kind of slide together and it just all rests inside here. I didn't, nothing's bolted or mounted or glued to the tote itself. So this comes right out if you need to go back to just a standard tote. But it allows you to kind of compartmentalize what you're doing. The thing I really liked about this, other than the fact that you can pull things out without everything kind of avalanching on top of you, it also makes it really easy just to look in here and get a general idea of, okay, is everything packed? If one of these slots is missing, or if one of these major items is missing, it makes it a lot more evident just to look at it and realize that. So starting in this back corner, I keep it's actually a percolator. We just use it as a kettle. We don't really use the percolator very much. It's not our favorite way of doing coffee, but it is a percolator. I was using some coffee more specific kettles in the past. But with me, my wife, my daughter, we'd wake up, especially on colder winter camping trips, and we all want something warm to drink. Or the other kettle wasn't big enough for all 3 of us, so we'd have to make a pot, make a coffee, fill it back up, make it tea, fill it back up, make it hot chocolate, and it just kind of became a little excessive. So this way I can fill it up, heat up the water, and then we can all make something to drink. So I don't know what the brand is of this. You can find these pretty much anywhere. I'll put some Amazon links of something similar. I think this actually was a set. You got this and like the 4 little coffee cups. I don't have the coffee cups in here right now, but sometimes I do like to bring those if we're doing something like soups. If we have like a tomato soup and grilled cheese, those little coffee cups are nice to be able to just put the soup in. So they're not in here right now. I'd have to grab those out of the garage. But that's something that we do like to bring, but it's not necessarily a necessity on every trip. Most of the stuff that's in here comes with us almost all the time. Depending on where we're camping, what the conditions are, and what meals we're planning, there are some other odds and ends that may get thrown in here from time to time. Next thing, we normally keep a handful of these kind of cheap microfiber cloths. These are great for washing and drying dishes, and I also use them to kind of help pack some of the gear in so it's not rattling up against each other. Speaking of coffee, I always bring a hand grinder. Again, this wasn't bought for camping. This was just for around the house. Ended up getting a fancy coffee maker that grinds all in one for the house, so now this has become our camp grinder. So this is just I think it's a Hario grinder. It's not the smallest. I know I've seen some of the smaller slim ones. Kind of thought about maybe changing to one of those just to make it easier to pack, but for now this guy works great, and I'll put a link to that if you're interested in something like that. For coffee cups, you would think coffee cups would be very simple. We bounced around for various coffee cups trying to find a good one. I think we finally settled on ones that we really enjoy, and that is these Hydro Flask tumblers. This guy is a 28 ounce. I think it's the biggest one. They have a 20, and I think they may even go down to like a 16 or a 12. So we have a 28 ounce. I think we have some 12 ounce also. So we'll bring one of these each for myself, my wife, and my daughter. We each get one. It's just basic tumbler. It's not 100% spill proof, but it does have a lid that closes, so if it does knock over or something, it's not going to dump out the entire contents of the cup all in one, but it will drip out. But these are great. Lids are great for having when you're camping. First of all, they keep the bugs out. If you're sitting there, if it's sitting on a table. If it's cold, keeps your drinks warm. If it's hot, it'll keep your drinks cool. So these things are great. Highly recommend them. And then also up here we'll keep, dish soap, hand soap. I'll normally keep a sponge in here. I'll grab a fresh sponge every camping trip. In the back here, this normally kind of rests up alongside. We have just some very cheap, generic camping utensils. I don't use the poker all that much. Tongs, I use sometimes, but not as much. Primarily use the spatula when cooking. Might look into maybe upgrading these to something a little bit smaller. These are more like barbecue style, so they're a little bit oversized, more than what we need. But again, they work for now. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Going back to coffee again, as I mentioned, we don't normally use a percolator. I like a pour over coffee. So this is just a ceramic pour over coffee maker. Uses these kind of cone shaped coffee filters. It just makes a really nice smooth cup of coffee. You don't get the grounds and stuff in it like you can sometimes get with the percolator or French press, stuff like that. So this is what we prefer. Don't remember exactly where I got this guy, but these things are pretty cheap. I'll find something similar from Amazon and put a link in there for you. Next, we have some of our eating ware here. These are just some cheap kind of bowl / hybrid plates that we really like. So if we're doing pasta or something, they're great because things don't fall off the plate very easily. If you have something that's saucy, it's not going to spill. A lot of times when we're camping, we'll cook, and then we normally sit in our camp chairs around the fire, or just sit and relax in our camp chairs and kind of eat out of our laps. We're not always sitting at a table when we're camping, so having these with the high sides help with that. And again, there's 3 of us to camp, but we normally always bring 4. Sometimes it's good if we need something to, mix a salad in or something like that, or just store some food in. If we're dicing up veggies, we can put the diced veggies here as we get it all diced up before we toss it in the skillet. So we always bring those. Another organization trick that we started doing last year are these little zipper pouches. Got these guys off Amazon. They're kind of a reinforced plastic. We've used these on several big camping trips and they're holding up great. No rips or tears that I can tell so far, but these are just a great way to be able to see, okay, do I have everything we need? So this is, like I said, our kitchen utensils. So we'll keep a lighter in here. We have a couple of knives with a plastic sheath on there to make sure that, you know, I like having the little sheath on there to make sure that we're not cutting ourselves or cutting our tools or our bags. Keep just a basic slotted spoon in there. Always have a backup lighter. I've used this more times than I'd like to admit because we've either forgotten a lighter or got to camping and realized the lighter was out of fluid. Always keep a backup. And then we found these camping sets. So these actually come from Colombia. And we were at one of the Columbia stores, and these were on the little aisle as you're going to check out, and I was like, these are actually really cool. They weren't that expensive. They're pretty robust. You know, they don't bend, they don't flex all that much like, you know, some of the cheaper plastic stuff does. And they're a good size. They're not too long, but you know, it's a good size spoon and fork. So really enjoy those. We always have 3 sets of those. And then I keep a little Lodge scraper in here to help for cleaning up the cast irons. If we're cooking on something that's kind of messy, sticky, that helps get things out. We also have these telescoping marshmallow holders, which are nice because they extend out to keep your hand far away from the fire, but then they collapse up and pack away very neatly and even come with their own zipper pouch to keep them organized. So I think that pretty much covers the kitchen side of the gear that we bring. Next is a little bit more kind of generic tools and gear. We always bring a hatchet. Not only for splitting wood, this is just a good tool to have. Sometimes, you know, I've had to use this if a steak's stuck in the ground, I can't get it to pull back out or something. Having something like that can kind of help pull that back out. Rubber mallet. Obviously, these are great for driving the stakes into the ground, especially if it's something hard. It tends to not bend the stakes as much, and it makes it really easy to get those stakes in if it is harder ground. Cheap multi-tool. Multi-tools are just always great to have. Again, this is just kind of a basic one, nothing special, but always recommend having a multi-tool in or around your camp gear. These are some extra stakes. Nothing worse than getting somewhere and realizing you lost a stake or missing a stake. So I've ended up buying some thicker stakes over the years, just either replacing ones that came with the tent that bent or whatnot. So now I have a pretty good handful of extra stakes. I think there's, you know, maybe 10 in here. So our tent has its own stakes, so these are strictly extra. So like I said, if we're missing some for the tent, we can use these. Or if we need to, you know, set up a tarp for shade or wind or water protection, so having some extra stakes are always good to have. So this is another one of those little zipper pouches. The kit that we bought, it's all different colors, but we went with that one because it's different sizes, which is kind of nice. Some big, some small, some medium size. This one has, you know, duct tape, paracord, some zip ties, an extra fire starter, a little knife sharpener. So this is more of a something broke, something went wrong, some extra gear. So this isn't something that gets used every time, but it's definitely something that when you need it, it's good to have. One thing that's in here is extra. Can I pull it out? So this is extra elastic cordage, like bungee cord. There was one time we got to a campsite, went to pull the tent out and realized that both of our cords inside of our tent poles had snapped. And that was a lot of fun trying to put up a tent that had individual pieces of poles. I was able to actually get it together, and it held together pretty well for that trip. Thankfully the weather was nice and calm, wasn't any winds or anything. So I ended up repairing those tent poles with some of that cordage. Use the tent a handful more times, and then keep some extra so if anything like that ever happens again in the future. All right, and the next section, this is where we keep our propanes that go with our stove. I normally bring 3 of these. You always come back with a half full one. So normally one, I think this one's half full, and then I'll throw 2 fresh ones in there. I think there's only 2 in here at the moment. So before we actually get ready to head out, I'd put a 3rd one in here. And then also keep a couple of pairs of gloves, just some work kind of leather gloves. These are good for handling the cast irons when they're hot, or if you're dealing with the fire or anything. Obviously they don't provide as much heat protection as like a oven mitt or something like that, but for something quick, those are good. And then these are just some kind of generic grippy style, almost like gardening gloves is what we normally use these for around the house. So that's just kind of good to have in case you need to protect your hands from anything while you're out camping. And then the last section here, some more miscellaneous kind of equipment. We keep some toilet paper and duty bags here. Pretty self-explanatory there. For if we're camping in the summer months, we keep a whole bag of bug protection. So some different off sprays. We keep some of those fly traps, those sticky traps, things like that in here. And then we normally keep a citronella candle in here as well. I'm kind of torn on whether or not these things actually work, but if nothing else, you can have a nice little candlelight dinner. So that pretty much covers this. I guess last thing what we keep in here, last thing I'll try to show you is the dividers I put in here. So these are the dividers I built. Again, they slide in. I've tried my best to match the contours of the tote, and they fit in there snugly to where they don't move around. All I did to put these together is I notched each side out so it just kind of wedges together like reminds me of like the old Lincoln logs. And this has just been great. It adds some rigidity to the box because these things are a little flexible. But mainly it just adds some organization to where you have all your different compartments. So then when you just look in here, you can kind of see, okay, I got my cups, I got my coffee pot, I got my plates, I got my propane. It's very easy to see. Like I said before, we just had all this stuff just thrown in the bottom of this thing. You normally put your big stuff at the bottom, but then when you pull that out, everything just kind of avalanches back on top, and then it's hard to tell, did I get everything? Is everything packed? So this has really changed the way we packed, and it definitely makes packing up and going, and then packing up and coming home a lot easier. And I don't have that feeling of, oh, did we forget something? Are we missing something? So this is what's been working for us. We've used this setup for last, I think it might have been about a year that I made the little dividers. We used it when we did our big trip to Grand Canyon, White Sands, Zion National Park, and it's been great. So this is what works for us. If I have any downsides, it's probably just the size and the weight of this. I've been debating on, do I switch this up and maybe get different totes and maybe put just the kitchen stuff in a tote and then just the other gear in a tote, just to get some smaller totes to make it a little bit more manageable to carry and to move. Another thing that might be a little nitpicky, but I wish this had some kind of little channels for when I ratchet this thing down. We use a little flatbed trailer to carry a lot of our camping gear, just because I have a Nissan Xterra, so it doesn't have a whole lot of storage space. And with the Gazelle tent and how big those things are packed up, having that little trailer has been great. So we normally throw a couple of straps over this. It does have some little teeth in the back that you can catch a strap in, but it'd be nice if it had the actual channels that a strap could lay in and keep it from sliding back and forth. But again, the size and the weight can kind of be a pain depending on if you're having to carry this thing a long distance, especially if you're by yourself. Last thing you want to do is be carrying a 60-pound box and trip over a stump or a hole. So that's always a concern. But beyond that, this thing's been great. Like I said, we've been using this box, I don't know, 7-8 years for camping. All the latches, you know, there's no cracks or breaks or anything. Sometimes this hinge along the back kind of gets misaligned. You got to make sure that stays aligned when you're closing it. But this thing's been great. Hope this has been helpful. Again, kind of debating on maybe switching it up and going to a different style tote. So if you have a tote out there that you really like, let me know in the comments. I might check them out. I might try something different. But for now, this is what we're doing. So I hope this has been helpful. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time.